Roll call, please, Jody.
Erin Earl. Here. Robert Case. Jennifer Hoskins.
Here.
Jennifer Lima.
Here.
Thomas Bridey.
Here.
Christine LaPierre.
Thank you. Mr. Chase did inform myself and Dr. Pallotta that he is very sick and not feeling well, and so he will not be joining us tonight, which is good for all of us because we also don't want to get sick, and so we hope he is feeling better soon. Citizens' comments, Joan, do you have one? None?
Did you have one?
I did.
Sign. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't see that you signed.
It's okay. Come on up,
Oh,
Bob.
wait, no.
Wow, someone's here. Can I take up 10 of them? No. Robert Jones, 63 Pheasant Run. I'm simply here because everyone except Ms. Hoskins fails to respond to any emails I send. And I'm just wondering whether you find that as acceptable behavior on the part of especially you as elected officials to not respond to what I believe are serious inquiries. Your own policy, DBC, requires you to provide certain budget information to the public. That was even re-updated last year by the last year's school committee. They are not that onerous of stuff. They're stuff that you should have been doing all along. 2-year actuals, end of year. You're required by your own policy to do a fund balance review. You're required by your own policy to do periodic reviews. You stop printing after September, any monthly reconciliations, the monthly munis runs. How is the public to have any faith in any of these numbers you're doing? You're actually asking for more than the superintendent's budget. Every other school committee, at least I was part of before that, adhered to the budget policy. Where are the enterprise fund numbers? Where's the special revenue number? Where's the actual CIP that you actually approved, as opposed to what the former interim superintendent presented? All of these things are things that are in your policy that should have been well done in advance. And I'm amazed when I listen to Ms. Hoskins make a request that's been in the CIP for 2 years, more than 2 years, 3 years. The money's there. And I'm totally confused about the need to do some kind of equity analysis. One, you just did an equity audit. Why wasn't it included in that? But second, you don't have to think very hard to say, sports teams, what have we done? We did a multi-million-dollar turf complex. We did indoor rehabs on the gym. Wrestling team got SMAT. Licio Field, separate, but is well funded. The softball team is the one team that hasn't gotten a decent playing field to be on. Why is that so hard to do? There's money sitting in the CIP account, which you actually did the CIP review and fund balance review. You would have seen that. Is the public has no faith whether you've set aside money that every other school committee made a commitment to build up the turf field fund. I guess my simple thing is, and under 4246-6D, you're allowed to respond to citizen comments, is to simply go, why don't you make simple budget information available to the public? Or you can choose to not do that, but it is by law, you're allowed to respond to citizen comments. So if you refuse not to, I guess that's your prerogative as chair. But again, I would say, what is the holdup? You're asking the town for significant tax money and not providing any justification. I look at this and go, you're using ESSER fund to fund structural things. That's just bad budgeting. You have no clue with the FY25 state aid funding formula, and every year they say they're going to revise it. That's the year the revals hit. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I take it you're not going to allow 4246-6?
You know, it's the policy of the school committee not to reply to citizens'
State law supersedes policy. You're allowed to do it.
Oh, I know. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess you choose not to.
2023-2024 budget workshop discussion. Can we have a motion to discuss the workshop? Or to get into the workshop? Thank you. Motion by Ms. Lima, second from Ms. Hopkins. And we'll turn it over to Dr. Pallotta.
Thank you. We have 5 additional slides tonight. The slides tonight are going to reflect the decisions that you took a vote on at the last school committee meeting, and try to put that in context for you. The first slide represents the votes that were taken to add to the budget, which were the 2 psychologists at 175, 570, the PE health teacher at 87, 785, and this reverse previous adjustment made to salaries. Elle had assumed when she originally put the budget together in the substitute line, $48,299. She had to reverse that based on the school committee discussion regarding the budgeted amount in the subline. So the $48,299 was added back into the subline, which is reflected in the adjustment on the next page, which is the $208,000 under the substitute line. You total that up, it comes to $311,654. So we had to find that amount of money in the budget to cut to make up the difference of the added positions of 311. We kept separated the ESSER discussion about adding the 2 psychologists, the late buses, and the Title IX/equity coordinator, and that's in the far column. Again, just to reiterate, that is not in the operational budget. That is part of ESSA for FY24. The second slide represents the adjustments we made to make up for the added positions of the $311,000. The HVA system at Stony Lane, we placed that $50,000 into the capital improvement budget. When the curriculum committee met, originally they were going to buy textbooks for $50,000, and then there was discussion and a decision was made to move that in a direction of purchasing a digital platform, therefore saving $50,000 in the textbook line. We made an adjustment in the tutoring line with a correction of $3,191. The adjustment to the substitutes, I just explained to you that $48,000 was put back into that substitute line, which brought the substitute line to $208,463, which is a reduction in the substitute line. We came up with the total of $311,654 to make up for the added positions that the school committee voted on. So that brought us to the original $76,161,833 that was originally proposed. So the next slide basically reiterates what I showed you at the last meeting, because it's a wash between the added positions and what we cut from the budget. So the percentages and the dollars did not change. Now the next slide represents, and we did this, I wanted to put this on a separate slide. You also voted for the LEA position to be in the operating budget. I had a meeting with the administrators and we discussed that position. Some of the things that we discussed was whether or not either the 2 or the 4 psychologists that could be added to the budget, whether or not the psychologist could assume the position of the LEA to save funding in that line. That was one option that we talked about. The other thing that we talked about is, when we hire the new special education director, that individual might have a different game plan or a different approach to take to provide that service, that LEA service. And we're pretty close to hiring somebody. I would say probably if all things pan out correctly, we probably could hire somebody within the next week, at least offer the position to somebody. We've completed our interviews with that. The 2 ESSA psychologist positions, again, you have that as an option to take a look at that at the beginning of the next school year to see if there's a need for that. So when you take the additional LEA position, which is on the bottom of the slide for $87,785, it changes the percents from from the previous percents that we had set up. So it adds to the percentage that would be attributed to the town and our ask from the town. Because any additional money that we add to the budget, we'd have to ask from the town. Because we've already made the budgets in our operating side to make up for the $311,000 of the added positions. Everybody following me so far?
No, you lost me at the end.
Okay.
So I was with you until you said that we were increasing the percentage for the town ask.
Yes, because I'm showing you the LEA position when we add that to the operating budget.
Yep.
That increases the ask for the town. Our other option is to, if you want us to, or direct us to, we can go back into the operating budget to find the $87,700. Those are our two options.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to show you that if we just added it to the overall budget, it would be an increase to the town percent of 3.77%.
So I have a question. So the numbers that you gave to the town, you told them they were preliminary and they were subject to change.
Right.
So really, we're not changing the ask, we're formalizing our ask, whatever we send over to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, they are still subject to change. One major factor would be if the General Assembly decides to give cities and towns more money.
Mm-hmm.
So then we would have to make adjustments to that. And my guess would be that if we got more money from the state, then the town would not, they'll give us less.
I mean, I guess my point is, in a normal timetable budget process, they would not have seen a number from us before we've had this discussion.
Yeah, we know that. And so I think the concern for me is, and I totally understand that a different special ed like that PPS position might have different ideas of how to cover that, or that the school psychologist might have bandwidth. But what I really heard was that there was a pretty good time need, and from folks that came and spoke, like not a lot of time to be given. And so I think my biggest concern, and the reason that we voted for getting that put in the operating budget the other night, was because regardless of how it's done, it seems like there's some sort of time need issue in helping cover those meetings with the increase of meetings that principals are being asked to go into. And so I think, for me at least, that is a concern that isn't in, and that I am also comfortable adjusting the ask to the town as needed, because we had said that was going to happen in this very unusual budget cycle year. The amount that we had put forward preliminary to the town manager, was likely to change based on these conversations. And so, I think that they know that that's a possibility.
And this was identified as one of the positions that was needed in the initial presentation to us, correct? The LEA position?
Yes, and that's in the budget. We just have two options of how we want to fund that. If you want us to cut more money into the operating budget, we can do that, or we just ask the town for the additional $87,000, and that's what increases the percent. The other thing you really need.
What would get cut?
Yeah,
we can get to that. But
We'd have to go back into the budget to see where we can cut the $87,000.
Mike?
If I may, so as a former special educator, in some of the less complex matters, frequently my school psychologist would sit in LEA meetings, or I would LEA meetings if they were the one driving it, particularly on a 3-year re-eval, because there wasn't a big ask. Anything with a large ask, or anything contentious or really heavy duty, is still going to require the principal at the meeting, whether the LEA is the school psychologist or a separate person. The principal will still get pulled in. So kind of the thought behind, if every school has a psychologist, it's an opportunity for the psychologist to touch base with the family and be the LEA in those more routine, run-of-the-mill, annual IEP renewals, whereas your 3-year re-evals may have the principal or a special ed admin in there. So
yeah, I think for me, Mike, where I would get concerned is how much time would be spent for a school psychologist in those meetings versus how much time would be spent with them meeting with students. And I know when you were, at the middle school, there was definitely a need, but what I'm hearing now is because of the extenuating circumstances of the pandemic, there's a greater need for students and more time needs to be spent with them. And so I completely hear you, and I think it's great that they would be able to connect with families in those meetings and kind of do a double dip, but I think I'm just worried about bandwidth and time. And so I don't know. We can, if you want to finish the presentation, Frank, we
I
can
think-
get into it
Yeah,
more.
just
but-
to add to that conversation, we'll put this, any position that you add, there's contract language that says you cannot lay off more than
7%.
7.5.
7.5 positions.
FTE.
So I would be cautious about adding the ESSER positions at this point until the end of the summer to see where you are and what the need is. Because if you're gonna add 10 positions, you can't eliminate more than 7.5.
And it doesn't matter how.
So you're gonna be locked into FTEs, and, you know, your budget, you want your budget to sustain that cost in your FTEs. So I think just keep that in mind in
Mhm.
terms of options with the use of your ESSA funds. Rather than to commit your ESSA funds now, wait, because you have other factors that might play into your finalized budget.
Right, I'm more thinking operating budget though, like with these positions, because especially, you know, we heard the teachers, we talked about adding 2 psychologists, which are sorely needed. But that is just, that's just staunching the flow, and I think, you know, to Dr. Earl's point, the LEA would, which was brought up as a needed position, to then take those 2 additional psychologists and utilize them in a function that's not student serving in terms of, you know, supporting them in a psychologist role and using them in more of an administrative role in those meetings is not utilizing them to their fullest purpose. So having this position would free them up to do the work that they're hired to do.
Yeah, I think we're okay with the 2 positions that you have put in the budget, but, you know, I would just,
I know we didn't have the time to do the ESSER analysis for obvious reasons, but do we have any sense of how many employees in the district are currently funded by ESSER?
We sent out,
Eight.
Did we get it?
I sent out,
Eight.
I've sent out the detail of all of the grants to you guys, so you could sort and total.
I asked Jody that question directly. There are 8 funded by ESSER.
ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3?
At this point, they'd be carrying over into ESSER 3.
And do you know what those 8 positions are and where they're spread?
I think that might be in the spreadsheet.
It was super detailed in that spreadsheet. It was like, that seemed to be like payment and not, it didn't say
It's
like,
annual salaries, it had everything. It had like the teacher position, the grant that they were from, and the annual salary, all the benefits for 23, 24, and 25. Like
When
it
did
was
that come through?
it's
It
like a
should have
98-line
been-
spreadsheet. I was kind of,
a what?
a 98-line
Jill
spreadsheet.
sent that
In my
out.
mind, what I was looking
Jill
for
sent
was
it.
something
Okay.
that said
I was like,
psychologist, Davisville Middle School, like 0.5 FTE.
I did not have the time to take
No,
that,
no,
like that spreadsheet and create that. I mean, I could do that at some point, but that'll take me quite a while.
Yeah, I
You can
guess
see the
it's hard to
detail in
take
there.
98 lines and figure out what that equates to in terms of positions.
I think
So-
some of them are bouncing around. Is
So-
that correct? Right, that's why you might see the FTE allocation, you'll have like a 0.6 and a 0.4 and a 0.2, you know, you'll have that because that one person
Right.
goes to several different
Mhm.
places. So to do that, to do
But
that, I mean, it would just
regardless, no
require.
matter how we fund folks, whether it's ESSER or whether it's operating budget,
We're bound by that number.
like that number's 7.5 is that number, right?
Mhm.
What I do think is known for at least the next couple of years is that we're not going to have that reduction. You know, like I don't anticipate that reduction being needed, unfortunately. And so I think, you know, making sure that we're meeting need and not,
yeah, I
I'm
mean,
concerned about the need, for sure.
we analyzed a lot of the positions, and just to give you another option for your deliberation, the $135,000 that's in there for Title IX / Equity Coordinator, you could take a salary, you could take the LEA salary out of that and use the remaining money to retain a Title IX person if you need that person, as opposed to hiring a full-time Title IX person. that's another option for your consideration.
Mhm.
Tried to give you different options that you would take a look at.
So per.
So the last page is the
yeah.
grants. You want to finish up with the grants?
Yeah, that's great.
And Al can take over at this point.
Sure. So this is the roll-up of what I gave you. So you've got the 3 different years here, the 23, which is our current year, 24, and into 25. And you can see how the increases progress. Those first 4 columns of numbers are all the grants. So you've got consolidated, you've got all the different title grants in there, the IDEA and the ESSER. The final column on the right, I pulled out the ESSER because that is what we're going to have to reabsorb into the FY25 budget.
Mhm.
So in totality, with benefits and such, it comes to about $887,000. The total that we would absorb actually is the $887,000 plus the items on the previous sheet, which totaled the $440. You know, the 2 psychologists, the late buses, and the title and the equity. So in total, you know, if we put all of these things into the budget, we'll be looking at an addition of $1.3 million of cost in
fiscal year
FY25.
25, okay.
Right, so the hires today are gonna create, you know, that liability or cost in the next fiscal year.
Just back on the budget adjustments page, I just have a question, like, can you just explain just so that everybody understands exactly what you're doing when you adjust substitutes to recognize 100%?
Correct.
How,
So what happened was the analysis that I had showed you that I did the other day, I did a historical analysis of salaries expense. I took the original budget, and then I looked at the actuals, and I just took the dollar difference. And in either year, one year it was $189, and then the following year was $192,000. $189, I
No,
wish.
I know.
Sorry. $189,000, $192,000. So that percentage, whatever that percentage of the original budget was, whatever that reflected, I took that statistic and applied it to the fiscal 24 salaries that were projected. So when I did my entry, I only took a small percentage. I took a 20, somewhere in the 20 or 20, between 20 and 25% of that, and I made an adjustment and reduced salaries. Because I figured, to me, that felt like a conservative approach to, we know we're gonna have some savings, I just don't feel comfortable hitting the full amount.
and this hits the full amount?
This hits the full amount, because to
So that's
Ms.
what I'm
Lima's
not
request,
comfortable
yeah,
with,
we went
is
back and we
hitting
went
the
to,
full amount.
right.
And that's what's calculated into your budget number.
The
I'm
48
concerned about
represents
that
me,
number.
getting rid of my entry. The 48
Right.
is me getting rid of my entry, and the 200 on the next page is the 100% of that.
So we're adjusting that, we're reducing, and what's the HVAC at Stony, like?
We put into the operating budget a replacement. So when we first put this budget together, we put in all expenses, all costs, and then we started removing out capital. This was something that we would move to capital, is to replace one of the overhead air.
But I'm
units.
concerned with that 208 number, capitalizing on 100% of that variance.
Well, my suggestion the other day was to go again, to not do
Okay.
100%, but in order to find the funding for these positions, that was an aggressive approach that I had somewhat, presented the other day. My approach would have been at 25%, which is
Right,
what I
that could
did.
leave us in a structural issue with.
Salaries wise, yes.
So we could go somewhere between 25 and 100,
Right.
And 200, the percentage, yes,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yes,
yeah,
yes.
and be a little bit more conservative, but not completely conservative, yeah.
Right.
I can answer your ESSER questions, and not because Dr. Clark just walked in, but because I pulled up the slide where it goes, but she could probably clarify. So we have 3 elementary reading math interventions, and this is from her slideshow in October, November timeframe. So
Thanks, Mike.
3 elementary reading/math interventionists,
Okay,
1 middle school math interventionist,
okay,
1 ESL teacher,
okay.
1 high school academic interventionist,
Mhm.
and then a 0.6 arts integration teacher. But this is where I'm gonna phone a friend. 0.6 arts
Let Jody get.
integration.
Yes, that is correct.
And then I'm gonna finish my thought and then let Jody clarify. And then we were adding a K-8 reading specialist and an elementary social worker.
Nothing like walking in the door. and
No,
getting
let's
a chance
try.
to breathe,
Why
right,
don't we
Jody?
talk about anything? We've got 9,000 other things to talk about. Let Jody get settled for a second, and then we'll circle back. So.
I was trying to save her.
So I had some, I don't know what the best way is to do it, but I had some questions on like line by line items where we might also maybe find some things.
Did we get a new line by line or no? Like a new one of these?
Based on this,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. So the one that we were using the other day is the most accurate one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we
Just
only
wanted to make
touched
sure.
those few lines.
Right, we only
No,
touched
that's
those
fine. I just
items
wanted to make
that were
sure.
on
There's so many emails flying around. I wanted to make sure that I didn't get. I'm looking at the correct documents.
Yes, yes.
Oh, no.
So what's the best way to do this?
Just give us
Just
the
start
the
asking
line item
questions?
and your
Okay.
recommended cut.
Well, I don't, not even
Oh.
recommended cuts, I just have some questions that I'd like
Oh,
answered,
okay.
just so that I can kind of understand. So my first, I'm just gonna start rattling these off. My first question is therapist, 53204, can somebody tell me what specifically falls into that bucket?
Could it be like a licensed social worker?
Well, there's 43 accounts that make that up, so we just have to pop into one of them and see what the vendors are.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We
just
can
like a
tell you
rough
some
idea of,
And is the reason, Jen, you're asking? I mean, I'm going to assume that some of the ones that you're going to look for clarity on are ones that have like a pretty big jump.
yes.
And so that one I had written as well a note next to saying, you know, in 2023 we had 25.6, and then this year we have 41.7, and so that was one too that I had a question mark.
Right.
I'm just curious of why.
Why the jump,
and
yeah.
it's great, you know, if we're able to put more resources into that area, but that was one that stood out to me as well as the one right underneath it.
One of those categories for therapists is an auditory consulting services. So they must be providing hearing.
Okay.
That was a big one in that group.
Yeah. No, I'm not allowed to work in that.
Okay, and so I just wanna go back here, this is so 5.1, what did I say, it was 513.204?
53204.
5.3?
204.
The other one is ALEE, behavioral health.
Okay. And those, so looking at the year-to-date, that's one that fell into that blue category on the color-coded sheets where it looks like it's just been a hard entry saying we're gonna hit the total budget. And on those blue entries where we're saying we're gonna hit the total budget, you put that difference between year-to-date and budget in the income thing,
Well, we actually didn't do that. That comes from the departments. So the departments look at what their expectation is for their expenses for the year, and they create purchase orders to earmark that money, to put it in there, also so that when invoices come in, they can get paid quickly. And so all of the numbers, all of the calculations in that particular group, going everywhere from 53202 all the way down to the orientation and mobility specialist, that was calculated and projected by the PPS department.
So like in my mind, like, and I know education is different from business land, but in business land, like you encumbered money, like, this is like down to the dollar, which seems different to me than the way I'm used to looking at it. Like it's weird that you would have like POs out for the exact dollar amount of the budget out through the end of the year.
You could with a quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
They could with the
Okay.
quote, and also the way, because I did ask them how they do their calculations, and what they'll do is they'll look at the students that they currently have, they'll look at the services that they know they're gonna need next year, they
Okay.
get the dollar
Just in the
amount, and they
IP.
multiply, and we need 180 days of this, so many hours a
Okay.
day, at this rate per hour.
Okay.
So they literally
Yeah,
go
that
down
makes
and do
sense.
that math,
Okay.
and so you end up with,
And that's why.
you know,
Okay.
pennies.
Like I
But then
said,
you'd ask for the quote, and you'd get the quote from the company, and then you could do a PO or
right,
whatever.
like
or
I
a
said,
contract
business world is
agreement, they
different
have like a
than
one-page
education
agreement, this
world.
is what we'll
Just-
charge, and
yeah.
et cetera. Yeah.
Thank you
I
for
think
that.
that's
It's a
fine.
finite number of students that they're servicing,
right.
so.
Okay. We talked about the interpreters and so, the orientation and mobility specialist, so the original budget for this year was 170, we revised it down to 101, and then next year's budget is 141. What is that orientation and mobility specialist?
Wheelchairs, access.
That would be to, if they have any visually impaired students in the school, it's training them how to use a cane or get around, so.
Okay.
I mean, depending on what their IEP would be, is how many services they would need and how much they would need to charge.
Okay.
So if they're learning a new skill, they might need more hours based on their IEP.
Right, and if a child's going into a wheelchair that's now powered instead of, they'll need to learn how to use it, and it's not just PT, it might be a mobility specialist that sets up the wheelchair or does trainings on how to use
Right.
the wheelchair.
Okay. This one was kind of interesting. Payment for services, volunteers. That just seems like a misnomer. Like, what is that?
What number?
53212.
53212. 53212.
53212.
Yeah.
5-3.
Volun paid?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
volunteers,
Well,
exactly.
let's just make sure we're in the right. Is it 5-3?
53212? Yeah.
212.
53212.
Was it $2,000 budget?
It is. Hold
The
on.
variance,
is
no, it was
2,000.
the.
It's about $20,000.
The original was
So I must
20,000,
have-
so you have 8 in there.
Oh, I didn't see that. I don't know why I didn't see that.
Yeah. Our actual,
Let's see this one.
I mean, current actual for this year is,
This was It's links.
Is that the link salaries?
The one I pulled up is links.
yeah, I think they're all links and they're allocated. I think they're allocated
Do
down.
you know what that's going to? Is that going to a salary?
No, because it's a 5,300. So it's got to be it's the links that's allocated to all the different accounts. Okay, let me see if I can grab an invoice.
I got it.
here.
Or is it the stuff like that Links pays for?
No worries, hold on a second.
I'm sorry. I don't know.
I know
I
the
don't
screen
know how
is
to make it
really
bigger.
small. It's hard to.
So 20,000, so it's a one-time.
That was like
So
one.
mentoring, academic, but I gotta think, because that's almost the full amount in the budget line.
Yeah,
So,
so it must be,
this memorandum, it's request for payment for the stipends budgeted for laymen, for links. Links, it's payment for link services,
Yeah.
for BCI, administration of BCI, mentoring,
Okay.
academic guides.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, Tom, I just looked up links just to clarify
Yeah.
what that was for me in life. And so, am I understanding correctly that there is I'm assuming a nonprofit? Is Links a nonprofit? Unclear from the website. So there's a company that works, North Kingstown School Volunteers, basically. They work with these folks, and the different programs that you were saying are the NK Mentoring Program, the BCI Administration, and the Parent Teacher Resource Center. And so, based on what we are looking at for 2023 to 2024, we anticipate a $2,000 increase in their fee. Is that what I'm understanding on the budget?
From the cost to run their department.
Yeah, I wasn't questioning. What struck me was we're paying for volunteers. That's why I was like, well, I didn't understand that. I understand the links part of it. I just didn't understand.
Pay for volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting line item title, that's
Yeah,
all.
exactly. And then evaluations 53213. The actuals for the past 2 years are much lower than the budget, and I'm just wondering why the big jump up. It's about a 40% increase from this year's budget to next year's budget.
Yeah, that's PPS as well.
Yeah, depending on the
53213.
evaluations, I bet you have a lot of nerves and
53213.
evaluations and other things that they may,
Okay.
depending on, I mean, that would
Due
be
to
my
due to
assumption
student
after
needs, maybe.
COVID.
Okay.
And we also did a lot of reclassifying. I know I mentioned it last time. You know, it might have been in one area 1 year, but upon a deeper UCOA review, it really, shouldn't be here. It should be
It should
here.
be somewhere else. Okay. Like I said, I have 1,000 of these, I'm sorry. Student assistance, 53218. Is this the salary for the student assistance coordinator? If not, what is it?
No, you're never going to see salaries
Yeah, but you gave us
anywhere
that.
below
Below
the
that line, okay.
51,000. So everything that you see in the 53s and forward is going to be purchase services third party.
Okay, so what would this be then?
Which one did you want?
53218.
53218.
Are you pulling it?
I'm pulling it, yeah, just.
Take your time, no worries. We really appreciate it.
So It's a 70,000. The 70,000.
It's about $70,000, yeah.
Effective school solutions?
Oh.
This could have been one of those 3 classes.
Mental health services?
But that's,
Well, no, because last year and the year before were both, like 68.5, they were both, like, within $2,000 of the $70,000.
did you say
budget.
ESS?
No. That's not it, that's,
Effective school solutions.
well, what's that? Let me go to
Because we have 2 ESSs, right?
We have a couple same initials.
Oh, one's the sub and one's the
Do
sub.
different
yeah.
things, so
Right.
let me just go.
No
into-
worries.
Um,
And I think the biggest thing too is just like remembering we know that L is new-ish to the district, and then also like there's some of us that are new too. So we really appreciate the
I can do it.
time to explain some of it to us because we want to make sure that we're doing our due
Coastline.
diligence.
It's
so
coastline, actually.
we're just trying to make them go.
I got 53218, right? Are we looking at?
Yeah, because that doesn't.
53218, yeah, I think
No,
this
that's
is.
the one.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Must have read the wrong one.
Yeah, because that would not make sense there.
No,
But
it's
yeah, RISAS.
Rice coastline, but this is, that's the.
Let me just see if this totals and how.
No, it's, if you go back, it's allocated.
So and that's for a.
No, that's not the one.
Oh, that's not the one, okay.
Oh, so the.
Well, what did you go into?
Yeah. All right.
What
So
is
so
it
that
there?
that. So the 28,839.7, it's the RISAS.
Oh, you know what, because you,
Cause in a grant.
because that's, that expense that you were looking at was,
Yeah.
was out of ESSER. If we have, just
Just
out of the
this.
general fund is the coastline, those were paid out of ESSER
Yeah.
on the same account line item, but that's the general fund
Student
portion
assistance
of it.
Yeah,
services.
coastline.
And what are we getting for those services?
4 days a week at North Kingstown High School, 4 days a week at Davisville and Wickford, but it's split, so it's not 4 days at each, I believe it's 2
And
days.
that's in addition to our student assistance counselor?
I think that is our student assistance counselor.
So that is a salary then, it sounds
No.
like.
So they're
It's
not
not
our
on a
employees.
payroll.
Okay, so it is a
It's a
salary,
purchase
but they're
service.
not our employee, is that correct?
So
Right, it's a
they're
third party, it's
contract
a,
service.
it's an organization that we hire and
Okay.
pay, third party.
40.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what was the company called? It wasn't ESS. I
No,
know.
it's
No,
coastline.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, this one's probably you, 53222, web-based supplemental instructional programs. The budget for next year is 257. Year-to-date actuals this year and prior years are much lower than that.
That's STAR.
So, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's STAR. That's our screening tool. It was paid for by RIDE during COVID, so we didn't have a line item for it, and now it's back to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But it's
we've had
been-
a line item for it, it's been budgeted, but we haven't had to actually pay for it?
Correct.
Okay. So what have been the year-to-date actuals and the prior year actuals that have been charged against it?
So outside of
We
Star.
paid for, with ESSER 1, we paid for a 3-year contract, but then that contract got put on hold because RIDE decided to pay for screening assessments. So, I mean, the quote did go up only because we're now going to include kindergarten, and we didn't always include the high school in that tool, and that assessment.
And I believe there are some, 53222, I believe there are some other web-based instructional programs, so that could be like, I believe that's where our Dreambox is.
Yep, so all of those are paid with a multi-year contract under
Okay.
ESSER 1, and now we're paying a year-to-year contract.
Okay.
But that's why that line item looks like it jumped.
Gotcha.
So for things like Dreambox and Lexia, were those items that we did not own previous to the pandemic that came in? Or were they
Dreambox
things
we
that, that schools were utilizing before?
Dreambox, we tended to expand the usage during COVID because, kids were reading online because they weren't touching books and things like that. So, we have pared that down a little bit, to go back to pre-COVID times where kids now have access to books, but, yeah, so they're continued.
Makes sense.
So this is the first year that we will not be paying, or that we will be paying for it ourselves, or is RIDE still paying for it?
No, this is the first year we will be paying.
Meaning, like, next, I always confuse.
Next school
Next,
year.
yeah, okay.
Correct.
The next fiscal year.
Okay, we talked about teachers. Professional development and training services, 53301. So the year to date, 53301. What was my question on that?
It jumped pretty significantly, 13,725 to 222.
Yeah, the budget is roughly half of the 2022 actual. I think that was my question.
I think this is a classification issue, because before we have contracts that vendors provide both the digital platform and the PD, and sometimes we hadn't always separated those into the actual lines. For instance, like we had with the GemsNet, our science training, we pay them for part of it is our PD contract with them, and part of it is for the kit refurbishing. So certain things like that, we are now getting down to where we're clearly dividing those and allocating them to all of the schools for what the bill is, and not putting them in one lump sum.
Okay, and I know we talked about curriculum last time, but curriculum development, 53302, is a big jump up in this year and next from prior years. Is that tied to the actual rollout of the social studies curriculum?
No, that's actually, that's Joni's line item. And the way that works is that, Joni, do you want to explain? Or I'll give you the overview of it.
Someone sent Joni the chocolate. There's clementine in there for you too, just in case. That's for Bob though, not the chocolate.
So the way that works is that Joni manages the budget of the curriculum, the assistant superintendent's office. Okay. So when requests come in, those requests are approved, denied, rejected, modified, and then she does a budget transfer upon the approval of those requests to the appropriate ECO line items within the schools. So whether the PD is for a teacher, whether it's for a principal, whether it's for anybody in the system, in the district, she also takes, that's one of the main things. There's PD going on, conferences, but there's also some other little things that people come around to. Joni, I don't know if you want to speak to the things outside of the workshops and the PD that gets transferred out of curriculum development?
Well, we get all kinds of requests, and we just review it as they come along with the assistant superintendent. So, but that's where the money would come from.
So what you see
that's
there,
our budget.
right? So what you see there is the actual at the year end is what the assistant superintendent's office actually spent on their department. But she's given a budget of $75,000, and that gets pieced out to different areas down below in the budget, in other line items, and they could be various line items because a lot of those are you don't know, unanticipated at the beginning. You anticipate the cost for them, but you don't know exactly where the budget needs to go and which line items.
So
there are various costs.
So I think if you had a new teacher teaching a specific platform, somebody retires, new person comes in, and they need to go to a training that's specific to GemsNet. I'm guessing that's where Joni would then do the transfer into the GemsNet PD line. So that's kind of where it is until it gets reallocated.
So I guess my question is, year to date this year, right? It's still got a $71,000 positive. So is that actual, or does that still need to be reallocated? Like, how much really actually
Comes out of that.
comes out of it? Because the past 2 years, the actuals have only been about $10,000, and I understand some of it may be reallocated, but how much fluff is in that number?
Well, if you look at 2022, the original budget was $75,000, and the ending was $9,800. So she peeled out $65,000 and change of that as the year went through. So whether it happens, depending on when it happens in the year. If we look at the prior year, again, budgeted $75,000, and she ended up with $22,000 in costs, actual costs, because the rest of it was pushed to other departments. So, and a lot of times you don't know what's going to be requested your way until it actually happens. But
I mean, we have a new
speaking,
classroom added in at the very last moment in August. It's a scramble to get all those materials, so it does help to have those not specifically line items, so we can just pull
that makes
them out.
sense. That makes sense.
There's so many unknowns.
And do the field trip overages, when the expenses come back higher than anticipated for field trip?
Because we cut back because of the pandemic. We couldn't have the field trips, so now we're back to full blown. So we've had to add more money to the line.
Now the secret's out, everybody knows to go to Joni when they need something. Sorry, Joni, I blew your secret.
No, that makes sense. So,
Jody, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
but so just so I understand where how that money moves though. So Joni, if somebody sends in a very valid request, like we had to add an extra, what was it, kindergarten at Stony Lane. Do you pay it out of that line, or do you transfer it out of that line to
Transfer it out of the.
So you
line
would transfer it
school.
to curriculum
Yes.
materials or to whatever, to the school, and then they would, okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure people understood how that flowed, because it's not that Joni's paying invoices out of that, it's
Right,
getting
no, she's allocating the money
allocated
to
to
the
the
other, yep,
schools
so that the
based
expense
on
is showing
need.
up. in the
Understood.
correct-
All right, thank you for
Okay.
clarifying.
Just like the field trips, that's exactly how we do it for the
Got
field
it.
trips too. Yep.
Understood.
Legal services, 53,402. Do we have enough budgeted in this line? Based on what our actuals have been.
But looking at me, I don't.
So we arrived at this number after looking at this year's invoices.
Okay.
Last year was.
Yeah, I mean, last year was really heavy, it looks like, but do we feel comfortable that this is enough?
Some of the legal costs sometimes are dealt with through the trust.
Okay.
The only thing that I was curious about in that area, just so the nice folks watching at home fully understand, is some of those legal services are tied to things that we need for students, right? For like meetings and different things. And so what I'm curious about is like the ripple effect, right? If you have more students, receiving services at IP, hopefully everything goes really well. But like I was thinking about if you have more students in, I know they do the special education meetings sometimes and different things like that. And so I wasn't sure if there was an anticipated increase for that, but maybe there's not.
So we did look at PPS.
Yep.
Because when we get the bills, they're separated as to whether it's special ed. And this number, correct me if I'm wrong, incorporates both special ed related legal costs and general
Yeah,
legal costs.
we did a split of, there's both.
So these costs don't reflect, I heard you mention the trust. These costs do not reflect payments to lawyers hired by the trust to defend us. This is more like Andy
Yes.
and his firm.
Yeah, so every time we
Okay.
call him and he bills us
Right.
for a question that he had to answer.
Right. Well, I know what lawyers do in that situation, but I just want to make sure it wasn't.
Good thing your school committee chair talks fast.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. What is other services 53406? Just in general. Because the expenses have ranged between $45,000 and $80,000 a year. I'm just curious.
53406.
Those are grants.
Clean Harbors, EnviroClean, we've got removing mold, these are the various other services, so,
Did you say EnviroClean?
yeah, we've got EnviroClean, we've got Clean Harbors.
Yeah, EnviroClean.
So Clean Harbors, I know they do. So what do? So we have one for a mold remediation. We have.
Neutralization tank.
Yeah, I'm curious.
I'm gonna click on that.
Yeah. So I know Clean Harbors when we have. So we have to properly dispose of paint. We can't just throw it in the dumpster. So it's those kinds of services.
Do we have like an environmental code?
I'm sorry.
Like an environmental code, like a,
Like a UCOA code?
yeah.
I don't think.
No, I mean, some of the things would go under repairs and maintenance, but then in most of the UCOA codes, when they have groupings, they'll have an other that doesn't fall into any of these other
Okay.
categories. So that would be, and the way they would, although the 5-digit object number is other services, where you would find the more detail as to what department it would belong in is in the other areas of that string.
Gotcha.
So those 5 digits are here, but in function, you might find 331, that would say it's in, it would be maintenance or business operations or which department that service was
Okay.
provided in.
Gotcha, thank you. Mike, you and I talked briefly about this custodial.
So yes.
So they're asking for a retroactive 6% increase?
Not retro.
well, they're asking for a 6% increase because they didn't get any increases over the past 3 years.
Correct.
And that seems like a lot.
It does.
And was there any discussion with them when we denied them an increase over the past 3 years?
Not that I'm aware of, I believe it was just a denial.
Okay, so, and we have not agreed to that, correct?
We've not agreed to any.
Okay, so is there any opportunity to have a discussion with them around that?
So I did have a discussion when I first received the letter, and they cited contractual language that says contractually they're entitled to a 3.5% raise annually as based off of certain factors. Those were denied over the past 3 years. This cost is to keep up, so the members of our custodians are members of a union, and they negotiated a contract that reflects raises, and they are passing those additional costs to us. So no.
I'm sorry, what? I'm gonna need to back up on that one for a
Sure.
second. Let's go down that journey for a second here. So we pay an external company for our custodial services.
Correct.
Those folks that are in those custodial services are part of a union, but not part of ESP, part of a different
Correct.
custodial union.
Correct.
That union negotiated with the company and had an increase,
Correct.
and that company is now saying that we have to pay that increase.
And I believe there's contract
Yep.
language in our contract that does state that if the cost of employees increases, then those costs get forwarded to us.
Oh, that's that contract, please?
Who did I send that to? Did I
You sent it to both of us, yeah, but
Okay.
but the contract is not, like, they're asking for a increase that we have not signed off on yet.
Correct.
Well, yeah, but it sounds like, when does the contract, whoever signed that original contract, when was that? When does it go until?
It's old, the actual
The
contract.
initial contract, I'm trying to think of when the last renewal was. So
Yeah.
what I believe has happened is there was a master contract that was signed in 2012, I believe. And then there's been renewals off of that.
Yeah, I guess, like,
And the
usually you do like a
agenda.
2 or 3 year.
Well, yeah,
I'm
what's
just
the
curious
agenda?
where we are in that.
Correct.
Oh, actually,
The
wait,
agenda.
I have the contract, I have a couple of things here. So, yeah, this is the agenda here.
Come on,
We have
everyone.
6.
What's the date?
What line are you on? Just custodial?
For
Oh,
the
never mind,
custodial,
542. Yep.
Yeah, this was signed in 2012, and it doesn't say.
So the
Yeah, and this is the memorandum actually with the dollar amount. That's the,
okay, so I can give you to save you the effort. I'm gonna just have these scanned over to you because they give the
Yep.
actual.
I'll just take a copy.
Yeah,
Maybe you can see 'em.
we'll scan them over or make a
Yep.
photocopy of them.
Because that's over $100,000 increase.
Correct.
And the whole purpose, I believe, of privatizing our custodial services was to give us options and not, like, that's, I believe that's why the shift happened in 2012, so.
Correct. And part of the savings that were realized in 2012, I believe there's still 3 or 4
5.
people who were part of
There's 5.
when they're employees, and we actually pay a.
Annual fee.
No, we pay an enhanced wage to the employees. Do you have that sheet?
well, I have the PO. That
Yeah.
gives you the total for the year. It's
So we
possibly-
paid enhanced wage to employees who were employees of North Kingston School Department when ABM came over. So I think that's where the savings are. And the enhanced wages for, I believe it's 3 employees.
Yeah, I think that's the full amount for the year, the
It's
bottom there.
$32,000.
Yeah. So for that PO, we were kind of in line with. This is the one that we had to.
Is that all in this, is that the fee that we have to pay due to the settlement in that?
Yes. The
That's in that
employees are
line.
moving over to that third party.
Yeah, that's in the 54203 line as
Yeah,
well.
that's
Yes.
included in there.
Yes.
Yeah, go make copies of those, that's great.
Yeah, do you want them now?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, you want
Oh,
them now?
yeah, that'd be awesome. Because that's a big increase that we're not even giving our
Does everybody want
own
a copy?
employees.
I'll take a copy, please.
I'd like to see one.
Sure.
Thank you, Mike.
Can I ask a question about,
Grab a piece of pizza if you want.
I'm sorry?
I was telling Mike to grab pizza since the copy's next to the copier.
I don't want to interrupt this train of
Okay.
thought, but I'm just curious about referees. Why we're
Referees?
paying so much officials and referees, 13416.
Because we have
Certainly
Division
not
I
as big
sports
as,
programs.
pardon?
Because we have Division I sports programs.
I think the interscholastic fee sets
Okay,
those
yeah.
fees.
Bless you.
Right now.
Just seems substantially higher than before.
Well, there weren't a lot of.
Not
kids during
compared to
COVID.
past years,
Right.
it's not, for 2022 and 2021, they were down because of COVID and there weren't as many
Yeah.
games.
So
Mm.
our,
Yeah.
our seasons
Okay.
were
Yeah.
shorter.
Yeah, that
All
makes
right.
A lot of,
sense.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like
Well, that explains it, I
36.
just
Yeah.
wasn't.
2 years ago, there was no spring
Yeah.
sports.
Yeah, you can
And
look- you can see it on
last year,
the-
spring sports, or in 2 years ago, spring sports were shortened.
Yep.
And last year was the first year we had spring sports back full force.
Full schedule.
34,121, almost 35,000.
So the top letter was the one when they asked me in November for the 6.5% increase, and I did deny that.
Oh my goodness, this is horrible.
And 37, yeah.
So did we not have a contract with them, Maya?
I'm sorry?
So they said for the contractual period of November 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023.
So when I met with them shortly after stepping down as interim superintendent, I met with them as one of our big providers, and they provided me with this letter, and I denied it at the table because we already had a budgeted dollar amount.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm looking at this original contract and it goes, I mean, it was signed in 2012 and it can't continue through, with the option to renew for 2 one-year terms. Thereafter, this agreement will automatically renew on an annual basis unless either party provides written notice at least 90 days prior. But
So when is our contract? What's that 90 days prior? I guess I'd be curious.
If we were to give notice, for July 1 would be April 1st.
Okay. Right, so right now we're gonna assume that that budget line's gonna stay as is, because it seems like if we're saying with ABM, that is what it would be, but we will investigate that further. But I would recommend that we keep it at that place, because we
Yeah.
wanna make sure that our buildings are clean and our students are well taken care of.
Okay. This one just is a weird question. What happened to the rodent and pest control budget? Like, it just disappeared? I'm assuming that's still being taken care of, because I never see any bugs, but like, it just seems weird that it's gone.
I believe that's,
I think it's a reclass, because if you look at 2022 actual, there was nothing posted to that account.
Right,
So it must have just gone up to maintenance and contracts.
okay.
Because there is a contracts line, and we did dive deep because Bob Parenti is fairly new as well. So we went in and started lining out, okay, let's write down every single contract that you've got, and it's easier to just put them up there.
Okay.
And then later on, I mean, I guess for UCOA purposes, we can pull it out, but it still falls under that.
Yeah,
So-
like, it just was
Contracts.
weird that it had a line and then now it's gone.
we are still protecting against rodents.
Yeah,
I don't want to name more than you do.
I knew that you were, I just
So
wanted to.
for,
Yeah,
when
we
you
can
say,
reclass it out, reclass it.
yeah, okay.
54312, maintenance and repairs, general service contracts and agreements. That's another one that has a big jump up from this year's budget to next year's budget. What-
That's where the road and stuff goes, you know, so
Okay.
that's the contracts. So we started, for purposes of, okay, let's get everything in one spot so we can keep an eye on it and look at it and
Okay.
understand it. So we reclassed several items into that. You'll see the jump in there.
Okay.
And then they went down in other, the other line items. Like glass and service, you could see there was a budget for glass and service.
Yep.
And that's no longer there. We put that into the
Gotcha,
contracts there.
everything
So
kind of rolled up in
we
there.
tried to
Okay.
consolidate it also that we could get a better,
So they all went up to 54310, is that what I'm understanding?
54312.
312, got it, thank you.
Yeah, we put a bunch up in
I'm
there.
guessing this next one was taken care of with that HVAC, because I noticed that HVAC had a big increase in this year's budget, but I'm guessing that was that, and it has now come out, is that correct? Okay.
50,000,
Internet connectivity 54407,
Yeah, that was a reclassification. So there were 4 components that make up our internet services. There's the routers. So there's the actual internet access. There's the routers. There's our fiber optics, and then there's maintenance and operations of our 16 miles of fiber optic cable. So that was a reclassification where That's, without one, you have no internet. So to accurately portray our internet costs, we put it all in there and took it out of technical services.
Okay.
It was one of those ones that could live in either, but it absolutely lives in internet, and that calls out that line.
Okay, so that's why that one
Yep.
bumped up. Okay, that makes sense. Renting land and buildings, 54601, is that just this admin building? Okay. And when is the lease up on this building?
Oh, I had that one up.
And there was a $7,000 increase in the
Yes,
rent?
there's in the agreement, because we have opt periods of when if we want to renew. We did have one or two renewals left. I can get that answer. I remember it was a little tough for me to find the lease agreement, but I can
I believe I have it, actually.
find that and get that back to
We
you.
signed that, what, last?
I think we renewed it last year.
Last-
Yeah, but you only
renewed it.
renewed it for a year.
I was gonna say,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
Because Greg did not want us to end a committee with a lease.
okay. But that is just, this is the only building that we're renting or leasing, correct? Okay.
And that's probably why it was a bigger jump, because it was only 1 year.
Gotcha. Oh, gotcha, okay. Rental of equipment and vehicles, 54602, what falls into this and why is it such a bump up in next year's budget?
Rental of equipment and vehicles.
Then you could go back and get your accounting degree. Hannah.
My what?
Your accounting degree. Your like next career.
For the record, I'm an analyst, that's what I do for a living, in case
It's
anybody
clear.
wonders.
It's showing, Jen. No, or we appreciate your diligence. So this wasn't your numbers.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see what's actually.
Because this was a Bob conversation.
This was a Bob,
This is part of the whole
Let's see.
maintenance stuff.
but I'm just,
Oh, that's my person. So this is all different schools. I can click on one.
can you pick up,
Which
can
one?
you click on the one right above it?
High school.
Yeah, this is
Uh,
the big
I
one.
use a mouse.
Copy machines. Copy machines, what else is on
Oh,
here?
that's all there.
Aztec and Leaf Capital.
Right.
So those are the copy machines. Is there anything else that's coming up under here?
No, that's that one that we did, that whole addition and pulled up the contract on them. The toner may be part of that.
So our
Actually,
copy
I don't
machine lease is a 5-year lease, and that is due August 1st. We'll actually be doing an RFP on that soon. So I'm sure we anticipated an adjustment. I'm just not sure if that's the full adjustment. Let me see what else.
Do you want to see another account?
Yeah, let's
Which
see another one.
Well, we
Any
went
more?
But
from,
actually,
we went from 159,000 of actual costs in 2022 to 163. So the new budget is about $4,000 more than the actual cost for 2022.
Okay.
So one of the things that we noticed is what you noticed. If you look at the original budget for this year, it would appear very askew. So when you kind of take a look at the actual expenses, then it puts a little bit more perspective to it. We're really budgeting only $4,000 more than last year's
Okay.
budget for that line item.
Okay.
For that.
And, but that is copy or
Copy
machine?
Yeah,
is
Aztec
there
and
anything
Leaf.
else in
I
there?
don't think there's
Do you want
anything
me to
else
pick
because
another
I
account?
remember.
yeah,
when we-
is there a vehicle one in there?
This one.
Yeah, let's see what that is. Because it's rental of equipment and vehicles. Copy of
It must be just the
Oh,
copier
so
for the
that's
transportation's
transportation's
copier.
allocation.
Like their piece of it.
The what, I'm sorry.
Like, so it's allocated throughout the whole district, the copiers, so
Okay.
transportation piece, like their department gets charged
Gotcha.
copiers.
Okay, thank you. Natural gas, the actual usage year to date doesn't seem to point to such a large increase in next year's budget. Can somebody walk me through that?
Yeah, the gas bills are generally pretty late. When, so what you see here, even though we pulled a January 31st, those numbers are probably only December.
Okay.
And the other thing is, remember the year that we're in, we did an analysis of all of the utilities, and we basically took 4 different scenarios.
Okay.
We've got warm temperature, which is what we're looking at this year, then we've got moderate temperature, and we went back, and then you've got to remember during COVID, now the buildings weren't even populated,
Yep.
so the meters were down at low, you didn't have the heat on in certain places. So if, what we did look at is the actual for last year was $300,000. So 330, we took what we understood is somewhat of a moderate 10% increase, because to be honest with you, I don't know if any of us can really predict what's going to happen in the fossil fuel market.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's, we did that analysis. We went we did a 10% raise and we did a 15% raise in costs, and we stuck with a moderate temperature year at 10% increase of cost, and that came to the 330.
Okay, that makes sense. I just wanted to know how you got there.
Yeah, it was a long road.
What's that?
Where are you?
Natural gas.
5621.
Textbooks, non-public and dual and concurrent enrollment, I noticed there's no budget in there for either of those. I'm just wondering why.
Textbooks. So out of district.
We have one line for the textbooks, and we move the money down.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can I ask about charter school tuitions?
Sure.
Are we, I mean, I know that was always an issue. Right, they're going up, but is that enough? Like, do we know, they just had their, lottery? Do we have any numbers?
Well, you know, PPS, they're working on that,
Okay.
but that was the last that she thought, and she was counting students. Who do I have right now, and who do I know is happening? You know, there was one child potentially in lieu of placement, you know, where the child was going to be district, but we're hoping that we can stick with that. The potential is that number is going to be, we're going to need to put some more money towards that. But we just went with, okay, who do we have right now? Who are we sure of?
Building improvements 57202, there were actuals in 2022 and 2021, but there's no budget this year. Is there a reason for that?
All of that would be going into the capital budget.
Capital budget, okay. Why capital now, but it wasn't before?
Well, this general fund budget is extremely lean.
Okay.
So if we're trying to find funds and keep costs low on the general fund budget, it's something that's done on the capital side of things.
Okay.
Could have also been a case where money was moved after the budget was set.
Because smaller improvements, something that's not a large improvement is going to be up in the maintenance, the
Okay.
maintenance account. So it's not that there are no, repairs and
Okay.
things going on in the building. It's just that it doesn't need to be brought to this high level of building improvement, because that's almost coming closer to a fixed, larger capital improvements. A building improvement is high dollar,
So
and there's nothing.
21, 22, and 23 original budget was zero. So it was probably something where once the repair needed to be done, money was transferred from one area. Money was transferred from one area into that.
Into
one.
that, okay.
Similar to
We talked about this briefly the other night, I think, or maybe it was one of the answers in the spreadsheets, but professional organization fees and other dues and fees, it was kind of like a twofold answer. One, employees are joining less organizations, but two, we might need to increase the other dues and fees. So I just kind of wanted to circle back on those and make sure that those numbers were solid-ish.
When we talked about the curriculum development, some of those are professional organization fees that Joni is going to put down into here as an actual expense.
Okay.
But we have seen a trend that the past few years, people are not joining these organizations, either whether we have substitutes as principals and they are not putting in, they're not going to what is $2,000 for one of those, the RIAS. So if you've got, several principals out or several administrators out, they're not joining these organizations. But that'll be the request to Joni, and Joni will pull it out of her $75,000. So don't call her tomorrow for other money.
Okay. And then I'm almost done. On that original presentation, from the beginning of the fixed cost, there was notes about pensions and fuel and utilities. And those are in here somewhere. I'm guessing they're just rolled up in something.
Pensions are in the 52,000s, all the way up top underneath salaries. So you have just two lines there. So pension is in there, and along with FICA and everything else. And I'm sorry, what was the other?
Fuel, utilities, and non-medical insurance costs.
Non-medical is your property and liability insurance
Okay.
and your vehicle insurances.
Okay.
So non-medical, which are non-benefit, and those are in there,
Okay.
yes, down below here. I can find a line item for you if you want. And the fuel costs are what we started talking about, the gas,
The
the
gas and
diesel.
all that
Yeah,
stuff,
we
okay.
kind of did a deep dive into that and spent several hours with the transportation department, just in several scenarios.
And then my last question is school supplies. Where do the supplies for the schools get funded from?
56101. And
What's the number again?
56101.
Yep.
And
that one
that
actually
was,
had a reduction, and I was curious about that.
yeah, that was a budget correction.
Mhm.
We met with the teachers and principals. Keep saying teachers because the principals heard from the teachers and they gave us the information. So we met with the principals and we asked them honestly, this is what we're going to give you. This is what we we are budgeting per student, et cetera, et cetera. We went through so everyone got the same amount per each student. We calculated how many students were in each school and so forth. And the teachers were actually really happy. A lot of them weren't aware of the usage of their budget and some of the things that they could do with it, but that's a realistic number. And I think, Stephanie might be able to speak to it, in prior years, she did a lot of the budget transfers, and the that line item did have quite a bit of money, and sometimes supplies are, as they do with Joni's, there's money in that line item, and then it's pulled out and put into other places.
So what is expected to be, oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, they put it, sometimes they'll put it in supplies, not knowing what they're gonna need, but then there might be another need in the school that then they transfer them.
Right, right. So what are they expected to fund out of this line item?
All of their supplies, the school building supplies, the principals. So we said, we went through each one and calculated it right with them. It was Kathy and I, we sat in with them. We calculated and said, is this enough? Do you think you're gonna be able to do it with this? And every single one of them agreed with it, and we're happy with the dollars that they got,
So,
that they will be given in
Yeah, wasn't
that.
it $45 per student?
Correct, yeah.
and,
So-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, so I was and the reason that this question's coming up is obviously as very gracious elected officials, we get outreach from folks. And one of the questions was particularly about school size and materials. And traditionally in the district, like many, many districts, the teachers used to send out something that says like, hey, if you'd like to support the school, send XYZ, right? And then we'd send it. But I know that there were some things prior to me joining the school committee where there was some confusion about could that be done, could that not be done, all of that sort of stuff. But then also, as a mom of a second grader, I know that there's still some confusion and disconnect of need and availability of resources. And so I am personally curious about it, but also as a school committee member and getting some requests from citizens of making sure that the schools really have what they need so that they don't feel like they can't ask, and then parents not feeling like they can help support in that way. So it's a complicated one in one line.
So
Did I get any? Did I grasp the
I think you
confusion?
hit that.
We've
But-
tried to tighten that up at the
Yeah.
council meeting with the principals, talking about the list
Mhm.
of, expensive items that need to be purchased, and that just can't, we have to be purchasing those with school funds, and that things shouldn't go out to be put on children in order to make things run. Like if they wanna bring their own pencil box and their own, that's great, but
Ticonderoga pencils.
Ticonderoga
Finally
pencils.
say it. I've had to say
I
that.
don't even know what that means.
It's a
Those
special-
fancy-
Those are
Special
fancy
kind of
ones.
pencil that-
They're the thick
brown
ones that my
the
kid
big
writes
brown
with?
ones.
No.
But I think too, like some parents want to donate and feel like they cannot.
So I've put into writing to the principals that if a parent wants to donate, you can gladly accept it, because this came up while I was the interim superintendent. But what we shouldn't be doing is we shouldn't be asking for supplies that the school department
Yeah,
should be
right.
providing.
So-
So don't ask for the Puffs Plus with aloe. Like, we shouldn't be asking parents to provide Puffs Plus with aloe,
Correct.
or the 100
Ticonderoga pencil.
Ticonderoga pencils, or the Crayola,
Yeah.
not the
So I
crayon.
guess my question would be, in this, I think is budget, because I assume that the 3-ply tissues plus aloe are more expensive than whatever we buy. Like, are teachers allowed to have that autonomy to purchase what they actually want versus what, like, if my kid's gonna be better in school and better behaved because they have tissues that don't make them whine and complain all day, are teachers able to purchase those?
So those purchases come from the
At the building level,
principal.
yeah, so I'm seeing it, like, I have last year's, right, so I have Hamilton's, I've got 5, 6, 103, supplies and materials, it looks like in 2022, 2023, 47,520 was designated to that line for Hamilton, right? So they had about just under $50,000 for school supplies. And so my question is, I don't know if, are they spending those lines all the way down? I want to make sure that they don't have the perception of, oh, we don't even have what we need as far as what, like, the special pencils that we think help students learn better, or the tissues that help kids not rip their noses apart. And then is that number going to get reduced if we approve this budget? So if Hamilton had 47,520, if this goes down, are they going to have less? And is that really the truth?
So, and Jody, maybe you can help me out with this, because I know, like, when I was at Whitford Middle School, we used to buy the Scholastic magazines
Yes.
out of our supplies. But I believe we've now,
It's now in a curriculum line.
it's now in the
Yeah, that makes
curriculum line.
sense.
So I think that was part of the I wasn't part of the conversation
No,
with
that's
the
when we were all in there,
building
yeah.
principals when it came to supplies. But I believe, knowing the process we went through with every other department, that was kind of there was a lot of reclassifying done. So now you don't need to spend whatever Scholastic magazines are out of your supply. That's going to the curriculum line.
That didn't answer my question if
But-
they can buy the fancy tissues.
I think that
Oh,
just to be,
if the
Right.
principal wants to allocate the
Principal.
funds
Yep.
for the fancy tissues, then yes, they can. But it could be now they can't buy the fancy. They can't buy
Yep.
the 99% white paper. They
Yep.
have to buy the 96% white. So the principals, when they get their supply line, they have discretion on how it's spent.
Yeah,
correct?
and yes, no, absolutely, absolutely. They can put in POs. I mean, they do. A lot of them do Amazon. Some of them do WB Mason, but they order their own supply. They'll put through their own order, and then Eileen just puts whatever they want, and she'll order it from the respective vendor. But one of the things to note is if we look at 2021, the supply line was $1.1 million of actual cost. So that was clearly a COVID year. So what you're looking at in some of this budget is a little bit skewed, because we've got $1.1 million in 2021, 2022, $406,000. So that's a huge difference, reduction. But again, you're now peeling away from COVID. And like I said, we sat with each principal and said, this is your dollar amount, and they were all very happy. And actually, several of them said, that's more than what we had last year. That's more than what we had previously. So I would imagine,
Yep.
I mean, if there's a call for it and a need for it, we'll have to find a place. Throughout the year, as we do with our budget transfer process, maybe we'll have another moderate year of temperature next year, and there'll be extra money there, and we can move it down, or we'll realize a surplus. But I mean, I can't. If you want to call to put more money in there, but they all seem very pleased
No, I
with
just
the
wanted to
dollars that
understand
we
it.
talked to them about. So
can I ask one more question about the tissues, not to beat the tissues, but,
Listen.
so if I am a teacher and I need tissues for my classroom,
Mhm.
what do I do?
As a custodian,
Okay, and the custodian will then,
go to the tissue supply area.
and in that tissue supply area are,
tissues.
and are they the nice tissues?
No.
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 Okay, so so if I as a teacher want the nice tissues, what happens?
They pay for them.
you
out
talk
of
to the
their own
principal. No, you go talk to the principal and say, can we get those tissues instead of these tissues? And the principal says, next month when I put in my order, yay or nay. I think that's
Yeah, so I
that's
think
their
is there a
money.
policy that says that they can ask parents for those items?
Yes. I'm not sure there's a policy. There's a directive.
Yeah.
Okay. Because and I understand that building principals have to make tough decisions, right? And they're going to prioritize, and they're going to do, the ecosystem is bigger than one room and one teacher and different things, right? And they have to do what's best. But say if you go to your custodian and they bring you those tissues, and all your students have very sensitive noses that year, for some reason the second grade class just doesn't have the grit that others have, and then they can't get those, but there's parents willing to buy it. Like, I don't know if I think there's a bit of a disconnect. Or if principals maybe think, oh, I'm not allowed to purchase those things because they've been sent the message of we need to buy the least expensive items we possibly can. That's where I'm just trying to understand better for the citizens that were asking questions, and then also just understanding the policies and procedures of how we.
And I know it also came down to equity. We have some buildings that are more likely to get the Puffs Plus with aloe than other buildings. And I know amongst our principals that there was a feeling of, well, this school always gets the nice stuff and we don't.
Or for donations or for.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so that's, okay. We'll circle back on that
we'll
stuff,
circle back on
the
that.
donation part, or, no, but I just wanted to see if we need to allocate more money, like, I was very concerned that, from what I hear as a parent and what I see on the budget line, they're not consistent.
No,
And
not
so,
at all, yeah.
So we'll have to work that out, but if you're saying that the building principals say that they have enough money for supplies, then we'll go with that, and,
I know like the wipes were an issue because the ones that the school issued can't be around.
No,
Are
the-
too toxic or something, or too for
No, we
use
had
during the school day?
spray with paper towels.
so they want Lysol wipes.
Correct.
There's things like that. I mean, for kids with allergies, wiping down after snack and things like that. I mean, you've got to take care of the tables and stuff.
So, but a building principal could choose to order Lysol wipes if they wanted to, is what I'm
Oh,
hearing.
sure. They have a, they,
As long as it meets so as long as it meets the stipulation of what's allowed to, so schools have special rules as to what can be in there. So I don't want to just say wipes or Lysol wipes because I'd have to look at them, but there are,
Not the wipes that are gonna poison the kids, but they can order the wipes.
they can order them from supplies, yep.
But the spray that they have available is not
No.
okay to be used during the school day?
No, the spray can be used.
Yep.
But the issue was that with the, Mike's gonna kill me, it was the spray with the paper towel. Teachers don't want to use that brown paper with the
Correct.
spray. I can't blame them, I would wanna wipe too. Like, you've got all those kids in there in the tables, like, who wants to do the wipes with the paper towel? I would wanna wipe. So, that's what the issue
But
was
what it
there.
sounds like is that principals don't want to use or might not be able to use the supply line because they have other supplies that they deem are more important than that. And
Right,
so
right.
that's where I think they might not have enough money. But maybe that's for another day. Jen, where are you on your list?
That was the end of my list, so, does anybody else have any specific questions on this?
I think for me to have a good understanding of, so I know with having a lot of transition in the central administration office, like whenever somebody's going to come in, you could allocate things to all sorts of different lines. So I understand that some things are moved around, some things are different things. But what I am going to have to go in front of the town and defend is the overall like expense, like increase, right? And so I want to make sure that I'm really clear in understanding like where those increases are, because when I'm staring at the spreadsheet, I can't fully tell because of what you're talking about, where it goes here and it goes there and different things. And so I want to make sure that I have a really good understanding of what we are asking for increases. And so I know some of them, and if there's a document that I'm missing that pulls that out, I'm sorry. There's been a lot of documents, but kind of where, I know some of these numbers, but not all of them.
I think you also need to keep in mind that you're in negotiations with the teachers and the contract. And so we had to anticipate or project a certain amount into this budget.
So that's in the
And that's
one-
all I could say at this point.
Yeah.
Because we're not
Yeah.
negotiating yet.
So that's in the 5110 line, correct? And then we also had the negotiation that was done with the SP, and we know that there was an increase there. And so I guess beyond salary, anticipated perhaps costs and actual costs of knowing increases, are there specific things other than the ones that we talked about
schedule-
today?
Well, that schedule that we gave you were the large items, the
Yeah.
custodial, that list of,
Mhm.
that schedule, which was over $1 million of increases. So that was, those are the major increases that we saw. Everything else was within
Yeah,
a
reasonable.
reasonable amount.
And that's roughly a little over 1% of the ability to discretionary spend.
Yeah.
When you cut the textbooks, what exactly were we cutting for the 50,000?
That was actually the health curriculum, because instead of buying textbooks, if we go with a digital platform, it is going to be less expensive.
And with that, like with the health curriculum, there's no way of piloting it for a year like we did with the bridges to save money?
We are
or-
way behind adoption on that one.
but
So, I
there's
mean,
no-
according to our
there's no-
6-year cycle,
Right, but it's on our cycle, but there's
Sure.
there's nothing from RIDE that says we have to do
No,
it this
not-
year.
not
So
for
we
health.
can push that off. It's not, again, yes, it would be off our cycle, but there's nothing by state law that says we have to do that now.
No, other than our health teachers are coming to us saying they need new materials to teach off of, and when parents come
Mhm.
and say we want to opt out, that we don't have a set curriculum, we can show them to opt out of.
Yeah, and it
And-
sounds like they look to make some cuts, which is good in the adoption, so kind of a compromise, I
Yeah.
imagine.
The other thing, there are some social studies funds in there as well. That is another one that we just got the standards put to us. I don't foresee spending that down. I think it's gonna take a full year to review curriculum materials out there and determine which we're gonna adopt, and that would then be on next year's.
And the health curriculum, that'll come through the wellness committee? Like that'll get adopted and vetted through them?
It does not.
But it's supposed to.
That's like 1.6 million.
It is
right
not
there.
their, I mean, it is one of the things that a health committee can be charged with. It was not what they determined, it was their mission for this year.
I thought that was the
The substitute line.
requirement.
It is in the state requirement that a health and wellness committee have, that one of the charges that they could take on is looking at health curriculum. We did have 2 of the members of the health and wellness committee sit on our health curriculum adoption team.
Mhm.
But it is not their mission. There were many that didn't feel comfortable being the one body that's the health curriculum. And we have in our policy of curriculum adoption that it's teachers and parents and community members. So we are following those adoption guidelines for curriculum.
And then
But they
that'll-
have been invited to come to the meetings, and several have.
Thanks for that.
I know that, that's received some questions.
Yeah. So another question I had is, as far as revenue goes, I know obviously, like I was looking at last year's and kind of where revenue came from and different things, and some of it's from ticket sales and different things. Do we have same anticipated revenue incomes as far as like worked
Yeah, I'm
into
just pulling
this
up the
budget?
revenue.
Because I know some of them like are meant to go back to folks. So for example, like the 2% ticket sales from things, like I think the intent of that was that that money would come back to the central office and then be able to be redistributed to support the arts or to support music, et cetera, athletics, et cetera. And so obviously with COVID, I can imagine that those revenue lines for a couple of years took a big hit, as you can kind of see. But I was curious, like, kind of what we were projecting as far as revenue from some of those items.
Well, for gate receipts, you mean gate
Yeah.
receipts is really the only thing that we end up getting goes into the general fund, and that supports the athletic department,
Yeah.
equipment and things of that nature. Us outside of the 15% per policy, that goes to a reserve fund.
Yeah.
So and those allocations have to be done this year. That's one of those things that haven't been done.
And how are the enterprise funds?
The enterprise, meaning the food service.
Yeah.
Yeah, food service, Trish is working on a budget for that. I mean, she's got her budget, we
Right.
discussed it. We just didn't include it here because it's not general fund, but we could get
No, but
that
if it
food-
runs in the negative, it will be general.
It's
fund.
not gonna, it's the food service enterprise budget actually is, they're looking to make some large purchases. There are several $1,000s in excess, in surplus.
Yeah, I heard
So-
that in the audit where the town got presented, that there would be
Right, so
some
they're
opportunities
doing
there.
fairly well. The food service at this point and projecting out, I would imagine for the next 2 years at least. And then I think we're all waiting for the conversation, Mike, right, about whether the legislation is gonna go through with providing the
Universal.
the universal lunches and projecting for like 26, but we're certainly fine for 24 and 25
Mhm.
food service.
What about like facility usage? So I know that there's a fee. We were talking about it at the policy subcommittee as far as that goes, and that if people are selling tickets, a percentage comes back, and different things like that. Where does that go as far as?
That's in the other earnings. Yeah, it's part of the other earnings category in this revenue. What do you have there? Do you have this, the estimate from the screen, the estimate of how budget will be
I do have
funded?
that somewhere.
I thought that
Right.
went into a
Understood.
capital fund.
Right here.
The 15% goes into a capital fund. Steph knows more. She does cash management.
Yeah, I mean, 15% they'll, for, which one, for the, like
For
the
gate receipts
gate
and-
receipts, for like, so it'd go to capital to improve.
But
it.
also for like the play.
The play,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
goes
okay,
to, yeah.
okay.
Okay. I was just curious, like obviously coming out of COVID, like those things probably weren't
No, there
bringing
was-
in income,
there
and so
wasn't-
then now, yeah. And then so that never hits the allocations here, as far as like that always stays in the capital fund, correct?
Right, the reserve
Yeah.
portion.
Yeah, but also, what were you saying was going into the other income?
if gate, like, the other income is the Block
Is that
Block
the
Island,
interest?
that's the,
Oh, Block Island, so, IT provides services to Block Island, what's that dollar amount?
well, this, that was half of that,
That was
right? It
part
was
of that.
60,
Yeah.
I think it was like
Yep.
60.
What's the other half of it?
I think that's gate,
Um,
that's the gate, receipt stuff, the other portion. Well, no,
Oh,
it's
we don't
other
have it.
earnings, it's our whole, so, let me pull
What's
up.
our contract with Block Island, Mike?
It is an annual.
Any opportunities
Let me
there?
just pull up the full-
We
There's
have
our general
escalated,
fund,
there is
7.5.
language in there, we have gone up.
And I would do, and I'll pull the same.
I want to say
Take a
2
look
years
at
ago,
which-
we did a 3% increase.
Because it's.
We
Right,
had
and, yeah,
touched
and I
briefly
think
at the
it's,
last meeting about TAs
let me take a minute.
and, you know, whether we were adequately staffed for TAs at the buildings. And I'm not sure where we landed there. Yeah, that's the way I feel too, and I'm concerned that we haven't addressed that here.
Why don't we take a 5-minute recess? We've been in for a second if anyone wants to use the restroom or anything, and then, yeah, okay. So let's
Give us a chance
do
to look at the other revenue.
7:40 back,
Yeah,
just to
because other fees.
let them reset for a second. Okay, yeah, I can just do that. We'll be right back. want to give any direction to the central administration, we'll want to make motions or do, you know, like, because the next time we're going to see this budget will be on Thursday, and that is when we will need to approve it or not approve it. And we need to make sure that we're ready and prepared for that, because we want to make sure that it goes to the town in time. So, other questions, concerns, thoughts?
I would like to talk about TAs.
Mm-hmm. So, in our current budget, we have no, I believe, additional staffing for TAs, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, but definitely when the nice folks that Dr. Pallotta invited from the different buildings, there definitely seemed to sound like there was a need, especially in the K1 area. And so not to add additional things to this budget, but I do think it's important to talk about things and think about why that didn't, it sounded like that need had gotten expressed and then it didn't seem to get up to this level. And so I didn't know if we had any background on that, or if that was maybe not a need, or if there is a need, if we can do anything about it.
And I also, just to get my other request out there, so we had the principals from Hamilton and Stony Lane here, and Davisville and Wickford, and I know that everybody has obligations and personal things, but the building administrators that were here, including Dr. Morse, were able to advocate for their selves while they were here, and I just want to make sure that we didn't miss the opportunity to hear from if there were any
Quid and Fishing Cove,
Forest Park, because they were not here. Like, were there needs that didn't make it past the assistant superintendent level? Because of course everything has to be prioritized. Like, I'm not saying that, but the other administrators had the opportunity because they were here to take advantage of the forum. So I guess I'm curious at that also, because we wouldn't have heard about the TAs had they not been here.
So I just pulled an open positions report. I think the problem is that they just aren't coming in to be hired. We have several positions vacant, so the money is available in the budget for the TAs.
Okay.
The problem is attracting them to stay here and come here.
Okay.
So
I think that's the conversation to have.
money
Because
sometimes helps with that. So how much does the TA make in the
That's
district?
a
We just raised the rates in the contract.
Yeah, but it's still pretty
Low.
very
I did
low.
hear someone say, and this could be very not true, because I'm pretty sure I heard it in the parking lot when I was waiting to pick up my daughter, that the sub rate might outpace the TA rate per day.
It does.
It does.
It does.
But when you work in the school, you get
Benefits.
the health insurance,
don't
the
need that.
pension,
Yeah.
the paid holidays.
And you're also paying a
Yep.
third party that's gonna put their 10% on it, because they've gotta make money, because you're paying a third party for substitutes.
Yeah.
So if those people are hired by them, that's their employee pool with benefits, they're paying the benefits, and on top of it, the company has to make their cut.
And they probably don't offer the health insurance and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody needs that.
So, but I'm just thinking, like, I'm a realist when it comes to budgets and staffing and different things. And so, if we have multiple TA positions available and people don't want to work them, it either means that whatever we are asking TAs to do is so egregious that they don't want to do it, or we're not compensating them at a rate that they think is worth doing that. And so I guess that is a concern. And I did notice that the advertising budget in the budget had, I think, no money in it, if I was correct. And so I don't know what we're doing to try to attract employees to the district, or what we've done in the past. But that's a concern if we have the money and we can't attract the
But we
folks.
have a program that we use School Spring.
Yeah.
We do have
They
a,
post
we're
them on
posting.
School Spring, and then it gets when you post it there, it gets sent to Indeed,
Mhm.
so they come up on that.
I mean, I came up, again, now this question and this idea that I was thinking about when I heard some of the conversations about TAs, and I might be totally off base because I'm not totally versed in the contract, I have not read the contracts and how they go.
Mhm.
We do have several open positions, so you're speaking of what the pay scale is on that. You have empty positions, so is the option to take the dollars for several positions agreed upon, eliminate those positions, and then redistribute the money, and so you
I
at
don't
least
think
have
you can
buy.
based on
You can't do it
contract,
because
no.
it's contract, so you're
Yeah,
off the
no, that's
totally
fair.
out of.
Staff like a
Yeah,
teacher.
I mean, I'm
and
just
they
thinking
get
like, how do you
Yeah.
move money around to be able to satisfy
You can't.
people who need money, and if
Yeah.
contracts are contracts
So,
are contracts.
I guess
that's
so-
that.
And it's just negotiating.
So if there's,
Unless they come in at a higher step or something.
And
But
that-
then,
okay.
then all the people who've been here for years
Right.
are another step.
yeah. So the TAs have
Agreed.
steps as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
So advertising is a good point, Erin, because when we did the rate increase, we kind of did a marketing thing when we did it. Remember, like, we pushed it out on social media, we pushed it out, I think we did it in the paper. Like, we did that, and I don't know whether it was the increased money, but I think we did see a little bump up. But if there's no money in the budget to advertise it, I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but.
I think it may be because we do advertise, but I think it falls under, facilities, because every time we do an RFP, RFQ, we post it in the Projo. So I wonder if this is another area where it got
It's just put someplace else.
reclassified, because we still need to do advertising for our bids. So that will still happen.
I don't know where bids go.
I don't know if
But
was
it
that
may-
a
it
purchase
may-
service.
It may be under the contract line when we were going through, because we got maintenance and some others.
So if I'm hearing correctly, we have the money budgeted, we just don't, people aren't hiring. But if we fill the positions, then we would be adequately staffed to the levels that the people, or do we still need more than that?
Well, I guess that's an analysis
would
that
still
has
need
to
more
be
than
done,
that.
but.
So how do we get these people in here to support, because I think that goes hand in hand.
So it looks like, according to Indeed.com, there's 3 TA positions available at Hamilton Elementary, and their estimated salary is $32,000 to $40,000 a year. And then there's 1 available at Stony Lane, it looks like. So if you take the math, say 40.5 is the highest that salary will bring in,
Nothing at Quid?
not posted on Indeed.com at least.
I don't think there's any openings at Quid.
What?
There's no openings at Quid right now, is there?
I don't know.
Oh,
Let me see, I don't know if this
yes,
report
there
will tell us.
It hasn't
We
hit
might
yet.
have closed, I mean, if the
Mhm.
position, they have dates, internal, external, and then you put so much time, so if it closes, then it won't be, Indeed won't pick it up anymore.
And certain positions get posted internally first,
Mhm.
and then externally.
Yeah. The ESP contract has to be posted internally first, always.
So maybe that's where that is.
And subs are making 190 a day?
No,
No.
not
One-
take home, 145?
Right, like I said, that's why I'm saying the take-home is different than what we pay the company. What we're billed by the company goes between 190 to 237 for a teacher, depending, I guess, on the step of the subject. I'm not sure exactly how they scale that. And then the TAs, we pay the company 165,
So when we had all those principal subs, we were paying.
462.
I just said that out loud. Okay. Understood. So they take home 145. The subs do.
A TA sub? Are they
No,
140?
just a teacher sub.
Teacher sub, sorry, I thought we were talking about TAs.
I'm concerned about the statement that TAs make less than our substitutes right now. That's where I'm concerned about in making sure that our budgets are aligned.
I mean, it's a contract
Yeah.
negotiation.
Yep.
So I
Yeah, so I guess we should deal with it
There's
at,
nothing
yeah.
we can do about it in this budget cycle with this, it's part of
Right,
it.
I don't
Is there a
know.
way if people don't
Yeah.
want the health, can I speak?
Yeah.
Is there a way if people don't want the health benefits to offer them
They get a buyback.
they get money back, okay, they do.
A
Yeah, that's
buyback.
in the
Like, is
line.
that an incentive enough to boost up the salary to something decent if they don't want the health insurance?
Well, you can't boost the salary, you get that buyback.
You get that back,
Yeah.
the buyback. I wonder if we could increase that. Or is it a
Not
Again,
separate?
that's all
negotiate
part of the
the contract.
contract.
That's
It's all
a
part of the
contract.
Mhm. Okay, so when that contract's up, we'll have to take a look at it.
But I think too, like, and I never having been a TA, I don't know, but from what I hear, like, it's not easy work. And so for a low paying position combined with the hard work, even, it's not a job I think that people, and I think we need them. Like, so how do we get them? How do
I
we
think
attract
I
them? How do
agree,
we
and
keep them?
always in the past, the administration was always fighting for more money for them, and it comes down to the contract negotiation.
And we
Yes,
just
so-
did that contract. Yeah.
You all just did that
Yeah,
contract.
that was the
prior to this?
ESP contract.
We're in year,
Oh,
we're
it's
in
the
year
ESP
one.
one.
We're in year
Yep.
one.
Year one.
Yep. Okay. So I heard a need, but maybe it was just due to vacancies, but it didn't seem like it, so.
No, I think they need more TAs,
Yeah.
but we can't even fill the vacancies we have, I think is what Elle was saying. But
I
there's-
mean, there are positions there, there
There are
are
positions
several
there, but-
vacant positions.
Yeah,
But we need even
But I
more to
think
be posted if we
What's happened
could
with COVID
fill
and,
any of
and
them.
the job market
what the
right now,
teachers
it's
were
just
saying.
difficult.
The
With, like,
principals.
as people.
Even though those aren't
get back
filled,
to
I think
work
they could
and-
Okay,
use
hold on a
another
sec, yeah.
2 or 3 at each school.
I mean, I think back in time, these positions weren't hard to fill, and I don't know if it's the salary as much as that there's just so many postings out there for all kinds of jobs.
Yeah.
That,
So I guess what I'm concerned about is like what's happening to students in the meantime, and what do we need to do to make sure that students are well served, you know, while the job market's in flux and there's lots of jobs available, and you know, like making sure. So yes, there's some vacancies at Hamilton and Stony Lane, but like if there are other schools that actually have higher need, like I don't think we know that, and so. Even so, to Jenny's point, like if we create them, we might not be able to fill them, but if we don't create them, we're definitely not filling them. So I guess that's just a concern. We don't have to do anything about it this year, but I wanted to vocalize it as I heard it very clearly from the building administrators. Other thoughts, questions?
Can we sum up to see where we are?
Yeah.
I think,
So-
again, I'm just gonna voice my concern with the 100% of the substitutes being, if that's what we're going with, as well as with all the positions that we're gonna end up with in 25, having to absorb into our budget, knowing that we can only reduce our force by so much. So adding any more positions to that line is gonna make that a very hairy year.
So in the operating budget, you voted to add 2 psychologists, 1 PE health teacher, 1 LEA teacher. Those are the 4 positions in the operating budget.
And I would agree
No,
that we
The only
should,
question is, how do you have a preference of how we fund the LEA position? Do you want us to cut the current budget, the FY '24 budget of the $87,000 to make up that salary for the LEA person? Or
Increase the estimate.
the other option I talked to you about was the $135,000 that you have in for the Title IX person. Take a salary out of there and put a retaining money under human resources for any Title IX issues that come to us.
I don't know if that's going to be an option, based on some of the things legally that are going on. So I think we should plan for having some in-house assistance, which is why I think it's one of the reasons that I think we are.
Right, but he's saying still have it, does not have a director level position, he's still saying have someone in-house.
Oh, that's not what I heard, sorry. I heard.
You could take the LEA position out of ESSA, correct?
Instead of the DEI position?
Instead of the equity coordinator.
Yep, equity
But,
coordinator.
but you could still have money available under human resources if we needed to retain the services of a Title IX.
You will need to retain the services of Title IX person next year. There's no doubt we're going to need to do probably. We know for a fact that we have to do trainings, like a pretty extensive amount, and the rate that I imagine a external contract to come in and do the level of training that we're going to need to do in this district, I think will exceed probably what we have budgeted for.
Well, you could have $35,000 to $40,000 for that, out of that 135. I don't know if that's enough,
Yeah.
but.
my
Just an option.
recommendation would be
Yeah.
we add the LEA position to the operating budget and we nudge up or down, whichever way we're talking about, that 200 to get maybe 75% of that number, just to make it a little more.
Okay, so we'll make that adjustment.
Well, that's just my recommendation. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
You have to make a motion.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion to fund the LEA position out of the operating budget and to, I don't know, was it reduce or increase out? What would be that?
Well, we already had a directive to fund the LEA position out of the operating budget.
Yes, you're right.
We already approved that last meeting.
Okay.
We don't need to reapprove it.
Okay,
So that still stands, we're not
Okay.
changing that request.
So I would then make the motion to, that $200 number that's in here, $200,000 number in here, negative
To
two.
reduce the adjustment to the substitutes to recognize 75% of vacancies?
Yes, I think so.
To 75%.
So increase.
Is that what you say is a?
So that's gonna increase the ask, not just by the 87,000, so
No,
the
I
next
understand.
que-
It's gonna
no,
increase the
The
ask.
next question is,
Yeah.
are
Yes.
you increasing the ask, or
Yes.
are you
No, I'm
asking us to go
increasing
back to
the
the board?
ask, yeah.
Okay.
I think that the ESSER funding over here line, that shouldn't change. I think we need to keep the adjustments in this column.
So the
It's
ask
super
goes-
technical, I know, but that's what I'm,
And I think the substitute line, for a variety of reasons, but also one of the reasons is, making sure that teachers have time to take the time that they need, right? We're talking about wellness, we're talking about teacher wellness, we're talking about things like that, they need to know that they are able to take days when they need to take days, and that we're funded correctly in that line.
and do you think 75 is I don't think 25 is right. I don't think 100 is right. Like, is 75 the right number? I just threw it out there as a.
You can't ask me, because I thought 25 that I did. So I'm
Okay, looking to somebody else.
Don't ask me.
I would be more conservative. I would go with.
For the adjustment to substitute line based on the analysis of the salaries. The potential savings in salaries, the adjustment, my conservative budgeting was somewhere within 20 to 25%, and now this recognizes 100%, so they're just deciding, you guys have to vote upon what that percentage you think is more accurate.
Or what you're comfortable with.
What you're comfortable with, right, what would you be comfortable? I mean, you could look at the dollar amount, the 208,
Yeah.
just give me a dollar amount, and I'll figure out what that percentage is. If that is easier, then, if that's more helpful.
What's the actual for this year?
I'm not sure I'm following this, but
No.
you said 25 conservative. You mentioned 75. Is there a way to be?
Well, this was she initially said 25. This is at 100%, so
Right.
I brought it down to 75.
Right. To find the funding for the positions to go back into the general fund, we took the analysis that I did and we brought it to 100% of the analysis, where I had originally budgeted it, between 20 and 25% of my analysis. So the question is, where's the comfort level to
Because you don't want to be
keep that
underfunded in that
adjustment?
line.
We want to make sure.
Right,
we
if you
get
go
that.
too high, you run the risk of potentially being underfunded in the salaries
Mhm.
line item. If you, that's why I took the conservative approach that I did, because I'm really hoping that we start filling vacancies and we start to do things, and the teachers still get to
We don't
do
have
their
that
wellness
breakage.
and whatever they need to
Mhm.
have people cover for
And that we
them
don't have that
when
breakage.
necessary.
Say, I would go more on L's side of conservative.
Outside of conservative?
No, without.
On
And
the
if we do
side.
that, then we just need to
Yeah.
find other savings. So if we give that directive, then we need to tell them where to get the money from. So what lines are we willing to reduce if we are gonna, they did that to balance the budget, based on, the analysis. But if we're gonna do that, then we need to make a recommendation on where that money can come from.
No. I don't think I finished, did you finish the motion?
No, we're still in
No,
discussion.
we're still.
Oh.
You didn't have a second.
Is there a motion pending?
I had said 70,
She had said 75.
75%. But
Alright,
I
so
have
make a
a-
motion.
I did make that motion.
Did you have a second?
No.
Okay. Yeah, make it clear for Joni to grab it.
Make it clear, Jen.
To amend the adjustment to substitutes to recognize 75% of vacancies analysis.
I'll second it just for discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor.
My concern is that if we fill all these positions, we don't have that variance, and we're gonna be underfunded in salaries. I would rather take a more conservative approach than the 75%.
You
I don't
always
know where
have
you
the
would find
option
the
of
money.
transferring funds from another line
Mm-hmm.
towards the springtime if you feel that
Yeah.
there's not enough money in that line. That's why you can't cut every line to the bare bones. You have to have the ability to transfer funds for those lines that are gonna be overspent.
What number are you comfortable with?
What number are you comfortable with?
No, she already
Well, can you explain, Al, more where that number Where you're now, like, can you explain that to us
Yes.
more?
Yes. So I went back to 2022 and 2021. I took the original budget for salaries and I compared it to what the end of the year actual expense was.
Oh.
And found the difference between the two, therefore discovering that realizing that's the savings.
So we had the vacancy fund. You looked at the vacancy funds in the salary line.
No, overall salaries, all of your salaries all together, because you have to
For all
understand,
reasons.
there's so many ways, okay, you have to understand that you can't just say that 189,000 was vacancies.
So, for
because
example, if you had hired somebody for a position and they came in at a lower grade, there would have been a savings. Or,
Right.
like, there's lots
or,
of different things.
Or
that
there are
could-
many people who are covering those vacancies and getting paid getting paid money to
Class.
cover those classes for vacancies. So there's such a flux in
Mhm.
salaries, you can't legitimately
Okay.
say that is the vacancies dollar savings. Because
Right.
even though you may have, $300,000 of TA savings, those classes were covered, therefore savings, so salaries were recognized, costs were recognized because they were paid, not out of the substitute line, strictly salaries line. So other employees were paid to cover that vacancy, so I just took the whole number.
Mhm.
You got your whole salaries number, you got the budget. So what I've analyzed is said, okay, one year the difference between those two numbers is 190,000. The next year, it's 189,000. What percentage of the original budget does that savings represent? Took that percentage and I applied it to our budget for fiscal '24.
Mhm.
Because we use the same exact process to budget salaries as we had in prior years. So you're apples to apples. And I took that percentage and said, okay, this is the total amount. What do I feel comfortable recognizing and adjusting this by? If this is the 100%, which is 208,000, I felt comfortable somewhere in the 25% range.
Mhm.
Because you need a little bit of, I'm not gonna, me personally, I would never bring it down and say, this is what we're locked in at salaries, because now we're not in a position to give anybody extra money to cover a class.
Mhm.
There's no way to offer anybody an extra anything to do anything. So conservatively, I took the approach of 25%, which is the 40-something odd $1,000 entry that I made.
Mhm. Do we know what they used to do in the past?
They didn't.
So Mary was just.
Steve
Mhm.
Janelle handled the salaries and benefits portion of the budget, and he presented his numbers and they were put into the budget. I don't believe that there was a post projection analysis done, and I did the same analysis to benefits, and you'll notice there's a $900,000 adjustment made there.
Mhm.
I felt that was very aggressive, and I was mildly uncomfortable doing that, but we needed to find funding in this budget
Mhm.
because of the expenses that we're now up against.
So Yeah, so it's hard for me to fully follow what you're talking about without seeing there used to be like when I look at this year's budget, like the one that we have currently, like you can see the breakout of what you're talking about line by line, and without being able to see that and really understand that, it's hard for me to understand exactly, like I feel like I don't want to make guesses. There's actual data behind these, and there's different lines where you can kind of see those different breakouts.
yeah, but all you're doing, you
Just
need to
the
add
five-
those lines together.
The top.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So
But some are very, very fixed, and some are not fixed.
in the salaries,
Kinda.
but your total salary cost is your total salary cost. At the end of the year, you're paying in the whole bucket. You're paying flat dollar. Like
Yeah.
this is what we're realizing money out the door. So it's not, the line by line basis is just going to take you to a more detailed calculation to get to the same place.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
So why would Steve not do it, and you are recommending do it?
Well, because
Because
we
then
were,
that's where-
had to look for money somewhere. We had to find the funds
Yeah.
somewhere, so, we just,
Well, I believe that Steve took a more conservative
Conservative.
approach to the benefits
Yeah.
line and the salaries than I do.
Okay.
And I believe that,
But what we're looking at now is much, much less, to Jenny's point,
to
right?
Jenny's point,
There's none.
Yeah.
this is a
The number
slim.
you have right in front of you has none.
Yeah. So I feel like, again, like we need, if that's the case, and then if we're talking about these different percentiles, the answer is not, like, we need these positions, we know we need these positions, and so what line, like, do we have a recommendation, there's lots of money in here that could be spent, could not be spent, like, we'll need to make up for that, or we need to, like, they said, go up to the ask that's much, we're at 3.6 3.618 right now, right? And so
It's a little bit
No,
higher
you're
than we
at
had.
3.772.
because the LEA
Because
was
of the LEA that was added.
Say the percentage again.
3.772?
Yeah.
And it's actually, yeah, that's where you are with the $200,000 reduction.
And then that would change if we change this number.
Right,
Yeah.
if you reduce that $200,000 adjustment, that 3.7 is gonna go up. I mean, that could
If
be
we change this
relatively.
to a 50% vacancy analysis, where does that take that? Can you do that on the fly, or does that?
I prefer not to do it on the fly.
I just didn't
It's
know.
8 o'clock, I've been here since 8
Yeah,
o'clock this
that's
morning.
fine.
I
Would it be
prefer not
over
to give you a
4%?
number.
Is that what you're wondering?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you know, would that be over?
I don't, no, I don't believe we would, because
I
what's the
want it down
difference
to the
between
penny, Al.
wait, no,
With
no,
three decimal
I can
points.
do, I mean, we can do a quick, if we just were taken to 3.77, right, and we take 3.618, that's almost a 0.2%. So you're gonna be real close, you're gonna be close to like 3.87 or something. What I just did is just recognize
Yeah, you
one,
figured out the
yeah.
the dollar.
1.2, well, no, the
Like
difference
back to the
between
math.
the 87,000,
Back to
the
math.
difference by just adding the 87,000 is 0.15.
Okay.
Mhm.
So if we're adding back
Yeah.
50,000 or something, you know, whatever, into that game, you're looking at like a little over 3.8,
Yeah.
3.86 something.
So I would support
yes.
the motion. Would you say 75?
I said 75, but I'll amend that if you want to pull back your second.
I'll put that.
Okay, and I'm gonna make a motion to make an adjustment to the substitutes to recognize 50% of the vacancies analysis.
Okay, does Jen have a second?
A
I'll
second.
that.
So I think I support that, and then so I would like to see, obviously, that adjustment made for this, and then we'll see what that looks like, for our approval at, on the Thursday meeting. Because at that point, you know, I think we have to have the larger conversation of like, you know, this is what the work that they did, this is where we're at, you know, is this the ask, is this what we're going to the town and advocating for? Because we know that, you know, we want to make sure that we're very secure in that
I also
number.
want everybody to realize
Yeah.
that they may come back to us and say, you're getting 2.4.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
then
I
when
understand
they
that.
do that, like, many of these positions that we really want are not gonna
Yeah.
be here.
Or we need to cut something else.
Right.
Yep. Oh, I understand that.
And I just wanna make sure, I know we had said it the last time, but because it is not in here, the LEA position needs to move to the additions on this front page.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And the last point is the
Wait, so
restrict,
are we voting on,
Oh, yeah, we need to vote on that,
Yeah.
yeah.
okay, any further, is your comments, is separate, okay. Any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor?
This is for 50%.
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Okay.
prefer it now just to see what it looks like, but I'm still concerned about it.
Okay, any opposed? And then obviously Mr. Case is not here, so motion carries. Okay, yes.
so the only other thing, as we talked about, the other positions, we're gonna restrict in ESSA and not act on them
Mhm.
until next school year,
Mhm.
or prior to that, if you decide.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The positions that you talked about putting in ESSA to restrict it, which are the 2 psychologists, the late buses, and the coordinator's position, Title IX. That's gonna be put under ESSA restricted for those positions. And you won't make that decision till
Yeah, that's not now.
Yeah,
you're ready to do that.
They're
Is that
not.
correct?
yeah, we'll allocate those funds to be used
Okay.
for the next school year, once we get there.
Can we get clarification?
Are they in
on
the
that?
ESSER application? Do you have to do the application for that?
Yeah.
I would have to
You should do
redo
the
it. We're in
amendment.
amendment right now.
Yes.
So do you want me to
Yes.
amend to add those positions
Please.
and the
You have to, you
calculators?
can't say that, you have to,
Mhm.
the board has to do it.
Oh, okay.
Right, we haven't
Yeah.
had a motion for,
Do we
or did
need
we
to
do that?
motion? We did, we did the last time.
Yeah, we did it last, Joni,
Do
we
you
did
wanna do
that
it again?
on,
Just
no, we don't have to do it
I
again.
got, look,
I think we did it the last.
I just wanna make sure that,
double check.
no
Tell me
worries.
the statement, because I got it right
We
here.
didn't talk about the calculators, though, like, we didn't
No,
actually motion
calculators
that.
we didn't talk
Do you
The,
have to?
No, I don't.
No, I don't believe you do,
you
but-
do, no.
Jody,
Wait,
can you answer
too many
a
things,
question
hold
about
on. The question I have to Joni is what motion did we make regarding ESSER on whatever day we were here? Thursday?
Made a motion to earmark utilization of ESSA funds to have 1 school psychologist at every school building for FY '24 and 2 at the high school.
So you have to make a motion to amend the ESSA budget, correct?
Right.
I have a question though. Did the
Those
school
positions.
committee originally approve the ESSER budget?
No.
No.
So we don't need.
You just approved the big contracts within the budget.
Yep. Yep. So are we making a recommendation
So you
to?
want those positions restricted.
Well, I just we did, I don't think we specified where we wanted the positions. We just said we wanted 2 psychologists funded out of ESSER for next year.
But there was a discussion on one for every building.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
we
but
had a
not
question
like-
about. Yeah, I think we said it like that on purpose because we knew that we were gonna have the 2 in the operating budget, and then we like wanted to make sure that like I think there was some conversation about making sure that that was covered.
Jody, what happens if we put those positions in and we don't fill them? What happens to the ESSER funds?
You reallocated.
You can reallocate it.
They just released 3 additional amendment periods, so there's one again coming up in June, one next January, and one next June.
Yeah.
So
if
there
you
are
can't
other
find
amendments.
psychologists,
Correct.
you can use them for other
Correct.
services for
Mhm.
learning loss and.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So
So do we have to vote for what we need? No. Okay. Do you know what we?
I have calculators,
Yep.
2 school psychs, the equity, there's a new name going around for
Title
that.
IX equity person.
Yep, and busing, late buses.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. So you
we'll
want the busing for the
we'll amend
remainder of this
budget.
year and all of next year?
Yes. Yeah, 2 separate.
Say that one more time.
The
Thanks.
buses, the late buses for the remainder of this year, which I don't know when the turnaround,
Yep.
this will get approved, but whenever that happens, and for a full year next year.
What else do we need for tonight?
We'll amend the budget to reflect the last vote with the LEA. That'll change the bottom line and the
Yep.
percent rate. And then we'll put together another slide presentation to the town council based on the decisions that were made.
great. And I did want to say we don't obviously reply to citizens' comments, but I did want to note if the administration could just look at the school committee policy of DBC to make sure that we're in compliance with that policy as far as what information has been provided to the community. I do think that transparency is extremely important in the budget process, and I know that we've had some extenuating staffing circumstances, but I want to make just sure that we are following that policy, and if we're not, I'd like more information about that, on Thursday if possible, because I want to make sure that they feel very confident in the budget that we're presenting to the town.
Now, I know this has been a hellacious process, and thank you all. I know it hasn't been easy, and I know I have asked a bazillion and 2 questions, but thank you, and I appreciate it.
Any further discussion on the agenda item? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion from Ms. Hoskins, second from Ms. Lima. All those in favor?
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
We get to do this all again on Thursday.
Oh, we got negotiations tomorrow. Do you need this back?
Sure. Unless you want to.